The role of mountains in enhancing the natural beauty is immense. People always have an attraction to travel to all the beautiful places of the world. But there are some beautiful places in the world where everyone can visit. Yet people try to enjoy its beauty even when they go very close to it. The earth has mountains, rivers, seas, mountains, valleys, and plateaus painted like the perfect touch of the artist's brush. How beautifully painted with care. These are just as the artist arranges color with color. There is a great history behind the development of this mountain. Although definitions vary, a mountain may differ from a plateau in having a limited summit area, and is usually higher than a hill, typically rising at least 300 meters above the surrounding land. A few mountains are isolated summits, but most occur in mountain ranges. Mountains are formed through tectonic forces, erosion, or volcanism, which act on time scales of up to tens of millions of years. Once mountain building ceases, mountains are slowly leveled through the action of weathering, through slumping and other forms of mass wasting, as well as through erosion by rivers and glaciers. High elevations on mountains produce colder climates than at sea level at similar latitude. These colder climates strongly affect the ecosystems of mountains. Different elevations have different plants and animals. Because of the less hospitable terrain and climate, mountains tend to be used less for agriculture and more for resource extraction, such as mining and logging, along with recreation, such as mountain climbing and skiing. The highest mountain on Earth is Mount Everest in the Himalayas of Asia, whose summit is 850 meters above mean sea level. The highest known mountain on any planet in the solar system is Olympus Mons on Mars at 171 meters. There is no universally accepted definition of a mountain. Elevation, volume, relief, steepness, spacing, and continuity have been used as criteria for defining a mountain. In the Oxford English Dictionary, a mountain is defined as a natural elevation of the Earth's surface rising more or less abruptly from the surrounding level and attaining an altitude which, relatively to the adjacent elevation, is impressive or notable. Whether a landform is called a mountain may depend on local usage. Mount Scott outside Lawton, Oklahoma, USA, is only 251 meters from its base to its highest point. Widow's Dictionary of Physical Geography states some authorities regard eminences above 600 meters as mountains, those below being referred to as hills. In the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, a mountain is usually defined as any summit at least 2 feet high, which accords with the official UK government's definition that a mountain, for the purposes of access, is a summit of 2 feet or higher. In addition, some definitions also include a topographical prominence requirement, such as that the mountain rises 300 meters above the surrounding terrain. At one time, the U.S. Board on Geographic Names defined a mountain as being 1 feet or taller, but has abandoned the definition since the 1970s. Any similar landform lower than this height was considered a hill. However, today, the United States Geological Survey concludes that these terms do not have technical definitions in the U.S. There are 3 main types of mountains: volcanic, fold, and block. All 3 types are formed from plate tectonics, when portions of the Earth's crust move, crumple, and dive. Compressional forces, isostatic uplift, and intrusion of igneous matter forces surface rock upward, creating a landform higher than the surrounding features. The height of the feature makes it either a hill or, if higher and steeper, a mountain. Major mountains tend to occur in long linear arcs, indicating tectonic plate boundaries and activity. Volcanoes are formed when a plate is pushed below another plate, or in a mid-ocean ridge or hotspot. At a depth of around 100 kilometers, melting occurs in rock above the slab, and forms magma that reaches the surface. When the magma reaches the surface, it often builds a volcanic mountain, such as a shield volcano or a stratovolcano. 194 examples of volcanoes include Mount Fuji in Japan and Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines. The magma does not have to reach the surface in order to create a mountain. Magma that solidifies below ground can still form dome mountains, such as Navajo Mountain in the U.S. Fold mountains occur when 2 plates collide. Shortening occurs along thrust faults, and the crust is over-thickened. Since the less dense continental crust floats on the denser mantle rocks beneath, the weight of any crustal material forced upward to form hills, plateaus or mountains must be balanced by the buoyancy force of a much greater volume forced downward into the mantle. Thus the continental crust is normally much thicker under mountains, compared to lower-lying areas. Rock can fold either symmetrically or asymmetrically. The upfolds are anticlines and the downfolds are synclines. In asymmetric folding there may also be recumbent and overturned folds. The Balkan Mountains and the Jura Mountains are examples of fold mountains. Block mountains are caused by faults in the crust, a plane where rocks have moved past each other. When rocks on one side of a fault rise relative to the other, it can form a mountain. The uplifted blocks are block mountains or horsts. The intervening dropped blocks are termed graben. These can be small or form extensive rift valley systems. This form of landscape can be seen in East Africa, the Vosges and Rhine Valley, and the Basin and Range province of Western North America. These areas often occur when the regional stress is extensional and the crust is thinned. During and following uplift, mountains are subjected to the agents of erosion which gradually wear the uplifted area down. Erosion causes the surface of mountains to be younger than the rocks that form the mountains themselves. 160 glacial processes produce characteristic landforms, such as pyramidal peaks, knife-edge areas, and bowl-shaped cirques that can contain lakes. Plateau mountains, such as the Catskills, are formed from the erosion of an uplifted plateau. Heights of mountains are typically measured above sea level. Using this metric, Mount Everest is the highest mountain on Earth, at 8,848 meters. There are at least 100 mountains with heights of over 7,200 meters above sea level, all of which are located in Central and Southern Asia. The highest mountains above sea level are generally not the highest above the surrounding terrain. There is no precise definition of surrounding base, but Denali, Mount Kilimanjaro, and Nanga Parbat are possible candidates for the tallest mountain on land by this measure. The bases of mountain islands are below sea level, and given this consideration, Mauna Kea is the world's tallest mountain and volcano, rising about 203 meters from the Pacific Ocean floor. The highest mountains are not generally the most voluminous. Mauna Loa is the largest mountain on Earth in terms of base area, and volume. Mount Kilimanjaro is the largest non-shield volcano in terms of both base area and volume. Mount Logan is the largest non-volcanic mountain in base area. The highest mountains above sea level are also not those with peaks farthest from the center of the Earth, because the figure of the Earth is not spherical. Sea level closer to the equator is several miles farther from the center of the Earth. The summit of Chimborazo, Ecuador's tallest mountain, is usually considered to be the farthest point from the Earth's center, although the southern summit of Peru's tallest mountain, Huascarán, is another contender. Both have elevations above sea level more than 2 kilometers less than that of Everest. Climate in the mountains becomes colder at high elevations due to an interaction between radiation and convection. Sunlight in the visible spectrum hits the ground and heats it. The ground then heats the air at the surface. If radiation were the only way to transfer heat from the ground to space, the greenhouse effect of gases in the atmosphere would keep the ground at roughly 333 Kelvin, and the temperature would decay exponentially with height. However, when air is hot, it tends to expand, which lowers its density. Thus, hot air tends to rise and transfer heat upward. This is the process of convection. Convection comes to equilibrium when a parcel of air at a given altitude has the same density as its surroundings. Air is a poor conductor of heat, so a parcel of air will rise and fall without exchanging heat. This is known as an adiabatic process, which has a characteristic pressure-temperature dependence. As the pressure gets lower, the temperature decreases. The rate of decrease of temperature with elevation is known as the adiabatic lapse rate, which is approximately 9.8 degrees Celsius per kilometer of altitude. The presence of water in the atmosphere complicates the process of convection. Water vapor contains latent heat of vaporization. As air rises and cools, it eventually becomes saturated and cannot hold its quantity of water vapor. The water vapor condenses and releases heat, which changes the lapse rate from the dry adiabatic lapse rate to the moist adiabatic lapse rate. The actual lapse rate can vary by altitude and by location. Therefore, moving up 100 meters on a mountain is roughly equivalent to moving 80 kilometers towards the nearest pole. 15. This relationship is only approximate. However, since local factors such as proximity to oceans can drastically modify the climate, As the altitude increases, the main form of precipitation becomes snow and the winds increase. The effect of the climate on the ecology at an elevation can be largely captured through a combination of amount of precipitation and the biotemperature, as described by Leslie Holdridge in 1947. Biotemperature is the mean temperature. All temperatures below 0 degrees Celsius are considered to be 0 degrees Celsius. When the temperature is below 0 degrees Celsius, plants are dormant, so the exact temperature is unimportant. The peaks of mountains with permanent snow can have a biotemperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The colder climate on mountains affects the plants and animals residing on mountains. A particular set of plants and animals tend to be adapted to a relatively narrow range of climate. Thus, ecosystems tend to lie along elevation bands of roughly constant climate. This is called altitudinal zonation. In regions with dry climates, the tendency of mountains to have higher precipitation as well as lower temperatures also provides for varying conditions, which enhances zonation. Some plants and animals found in altitudinal zones tend to become isolated since the conditions above and below a particular zone will be inhospitable, and thus constrain their movements or dispersal. These isolated ecological systems are known as sky islands. Altitudinal zones tend to follow a typical pattern. At the highest elevations, trees cannot grow, and whatever life may be present will be of the alpine type, resembling tundra. Just below the tree line, one may find subalpine forests of needle-leaf trees, which can withstand cold, dry conditions. Below that, montane forests grow. In the temperate portions of the earth, those forests tend to be needle-leaf trees, while in the tropics, they can be broadleaf trees growing in a rainforest.